Good morning and welcome back to Unraveled Game Thoughts. This is, I believe, the fourth section of my top 100 games. Take two. I tried recording this yesterday and I was just tired and yawning a lot and have a couple of late nights, and now I am a little bit more well rested and awake. So let's jump in to the next 10. In fact, the next several videos will actually be just 10 games so that I can go into a bit more depth with the games as I get into my top half of the list. This is numbers 40 through 31, and beginning with number 40, it is another tea game, and one I played for the first time, I believe, last year, probably toward the end of the year, 2021. Let's see, this is 2022. Maybe it was in the spring of this year that I received a copy of this game and was able to get it to the table and try it out and play it. That is Tabanussi Builders of Ur by David Spada and Danielle Tessini. Came out 2021. It was at BGG Con last year in their hotness room, and I didn't get a chance to play it then. It got real close, but didn't feel like I knew the rules well enough, and it was later at night, so I just never really got around to playing it. But it is a somewhat... trying to describe the uniqueness of each tea game and how they interact. This is dice drafting, so a little bit of similarity to Kenyu. In this particular game, there are 5 barges, and you have 5 different colors of dice. So the game's a little bit randomized in that the barges can go in any one of the spaces. You got blue dice, green dice, brown dice, yellow dice, and I think white dice. And you're gonna roll the dice for each barge, put them in the barge, and there's a scoring that happens anytime a barge is emptied. And every time a barge is emptied, that's gonna move toward the end game a little closer. And I can't remember off the top of my head if it's 3 barges empty and then the game ends, or if it's 4. But the game end is not triggered, but like you move closer to the game end as a barge is emptied, because then you have a scoring and then you go on to the next round, you refill that barge. So there's a variable length of the game. If players are really trying to stretch it out and they're trying to kind of make sure barges don't empty too fast, then I think the game can go on a little longer. And otherwise, you do have some limitation because there's only so many dice in each barge, so eventually one will empty. And actually, I don't know that you can really stretch the game out too much longer now that I think about it, because if you end up emptying barges kind of equally in that first round, well, then one barge is eventually going to empty, and that's going to re-roll, trigger a scoring, rather. Score a trigging? Wow, it's early and I have not had enough coffee. It's going to trigger a scoring, and then you're only going to have a dice or 2 in each other barge, which means that those, when they get taken, are going to trigger more scorings much more quickly. So I guess you can't really extend the game too much longer. It's sort of limited number of actions you're going to be able to take in any given game. But it's not a rondel. It feels a little rondelish just because all the action spaces kind of go in a circle around the board. But that dice drafting mechanism, when you draft a dice, it becomes, the number no longer matters, and it becomes a resource that you can use. So a green dice is used to build gardens, a blue dice is used to build water tiles, brown dice are used to build buildings. The game board looks pretty it's a very interesting look at the end of a game because different players have been building gardens or river spaces, or they've been building up the actual buildings on the board. And so you end up with this board of multicolored buildings because there's brown, yellow, and I think white buildings. And so and they're just going to be scattered throughout the board in various formations. So it's just kind of, it's not the most engaging, and so that is why it is in my number 40 and not higher on the list. But it is entertaining, and it's one I like to get to the table. I've already had Tekenyu on my list. I can honestly see these games kind of fluctuating back and forth a little bit. I feel like I need a few more plays of each one. But Tabanussi is a fun Euro game, and in the same vein of a lot of T games, it's got tracks, it's got, you know, kind of a sort of a complex system of scoring points that is going to scratch that Euro itch, and it's not going to be for everybody, but it's an interesting design, and I enjoyed it. I was able to teach it pretty quickly to Becky when we first got the game. She said she liked it. I think she would play it a few more times, and there are other people in my gaming groups that haven't even played this game yet, and I think they will enjoy it. But I struggle with where to rank this. This one is a tough one to know for sure where I rank it because I don't know that I have had enough plays of it to have a solid feel of where it fits in with some of the others. But it's on the upper half of my list, so I do feel relatively positive about it. Yeah, Tabanussi, number 40. Moving on, number 39 is a game again, kind of like Tabanussi, I've wrestled with this, and how much do I like this game? Well, there have been times I've considered moving on from this game and trading it away, but I can never bring myself to do it because there's something compelling about it, and it's sort of it's got that, I don't know, Dinosaur Island's kind of like this for me too, where I can't quite move on from it. There's nothing that quite replaces it, and so I want to have it, and I do enjoy bringing it out every once in a while. My number 39 is Everdell. It is got vibrant, beautiful art. Building to tableau is fun. The worker placement, tableau building, action selection mechanics work fairly well together. What makes it hard is it's such a table hog, and it takes a long time to set up. I've played, I can't really just play the base game. The base game's not too bad to set up, but I always want a little bit more than just the base game, and the expansions add just a little bit more, and they're fairly fun to try to play with all the expansions, but it takes some time, probably about 40 minutes to set this game up, if not a little bit more. And I usually have to kind of go back and update, you know, all right, how do these rules work, and what am I forgetting that I need to remember when I kind of remind people of how things work. It's not really that complicated of a game. It's a table hog, it takes time, and it doesn't come out enough that we can't just set it up on the table and start playing right away. I always need a little rules reminder for the thing. So this one's by James A. Wilson, with art by Andrew Bosley and Dan May. And yeah, it's a solid game. I don't know that it needs more expansions. I've been able to get all my expansions in one box, which is kind of nice, but it's pretty tight. I don't know that the box closes all the way. And it's just, I can recommend it. I've actually recommended this game several times to folks who want something fun and colorful that's got a little bit more complex, but can be also fairly family friendly. And I think this one falls into that realm. My kids have been playing it for 2-3 years now, and they were I mean, my son was probably 9 when he first played this, and he did fine at it. So it's not a difficult to grasp game. All right, moving on. Number 38 is quite popular. It's only 38 for me. It's another game there are some games in my collection where I haven't had the opportunity to play them a lot, but I just won't move on from them. I won't trade it away because I feel like there will come a day where it will get more plays, and at least from my family in particular, or there's something about the game that I really want to get better at this game and see it get to table a few more times each year. My number 38 in this case is Root. That fits that, by Cole Worley with art by Kyle Farron. And Root was one of those earlier asymmetric games where each player is playing with a faction that plays a little bit differently. I don't know if it's 100%. I would say this asymmetry is maybe a little bit more asymmetry than, say, Gaia Project, but probably less asymmetry than, say, Hegemony, I think. I have played Gaia Project. I have not played Hegemony, so I'm sort of guessing where it might fit in the asymmetry, but each faction does play very differently and how they will go about chasing their points. And so I have 6 factions for the game because I have the underwater, is it underwater? Underground? I can't remember the expansion. It's got the lizards and the river folk. And I've played the game. I don't know that I've played a game with others using those 2 factions. I've two-handed them. But I have played a game with the other factions, and it is a really interesting game. It has a design that is fairly unique, and it's fairly aggressive, honestly. For all the cute animals and the cute art that's in the game, it's a fairly aggressive area control type game. So probably one of the most aggressive games that I own in my collection. And yet even though that's not even the type of game I tend to play, I like this one. And I find it compelling, and there are times I just feel drawn to try to really get it to the table. So one day, maybe, when my family is feeling more aggressive, we'll train in this, and we'll see if everybody can play this more often. And if not, I'll just bring it out with gaming friends who enjoy this sort of game. So that is Root, which is my number 38. Number 37 is 2019 Alexander Pfister game. Yes, you probably have already guessed it. It is Maracaibo. This game used to be higher on my list, and I could see it floating up or down. I haven't tried the Uprising expansion yet, so I'm not sure how that weaves together with what is already in this game, and I haven't completed the legacy aspect of this game. There's a huge legacy story piece of this game that you can play through, and I've soloed about 10 of those scenarios, but haven't made it all the way through, and would love to sit down and play this one with Becky and get all the way through the legacy. She's played the game, she enjoys it, and this is one that I think she would play a lot more. It doesn't hit the table a ton, but it is a lot of fun. I love the tableau building with the cards. I feel like the way that's designed is very compelling in this game. And there's lots of different things, lots of different aspects of the game you can impact with your tableau building, either making your cards cheaper, kind of picking what actions do I want to enhance, or what cities do I want to be able to land in and do a thing, or have more options in. And so the tableau of cards you build will influence other aspects of the game that you're moving around. And the way you gain influence with either France, Spain, or England it's a pretty interesting, trying to find that balance of how much influence do I put there, how much do I go around the exploration track. what is my opponent doing, and how do I kind of counter what they're doing with what I'm trying to do, either pursuing quests or filling out my boat with upgrades. There's a lot of ways to chase points in this game. But it's a rondel largely. You're moving your boat around the Caribbean Sea. It does have a colonization aspect, so I will not bring this game out in the company of anybody that I think might be sensitive to colonization games and the issues that come with that. I feel like it's too close to that. Others have argued that not quite, as bad as others, like maybe Mombasa or something, but to me, it feels like a colonization game. So fun game, does have that aspect to it that has to be taken into consideration and who the audience is. But I do like the mechanisms. I find them to be pretty pleasant to play with. And the legacy aspect does add a lot of color to the game and what you can do with it. So that is Maracaibo at number 37. Number 36, I would argue borders on being a classic. Probably not quite there, but I could see it being a classic down the road. Another game that I've sort of debated sometimes about, do I want to keep it? Do I want to move on from it? But have decided that I really like this game. Every time it hits the table, I enjoy the play. It's got enough dynamic aspects to the gameplay that keep it intriguing. And that is Orleans by Rainer Stockhausen with art by Clemens Franz. And Orleans is a bag building worker placement game. It's got a little bit of that Paladins of the West Kingdom, because you're going to use different workers for different actions, and you kind of have to put certain types of workers down on an action space to take that action. It also has a little bit of that like a Concordia feel to it, because one of the actions you take is moving I forget what it's like a worker that travels around the city of Orleans or on the countryside and gathers materials. And so there's a little bit of a set collection aspect to that. As you gather certain materials, you can they will give you points in different ways, either trading them in or using them for other actions. But that is a unique element to the game. The other thing that's kind of unique about this game is when you're building, so there's two stacks of level 1 and level 2 tiles that you can add to your tableau. It basically gives you additional actions you can take. And when you get to take the action of getting one of those tiles and adding it to your tableau, what is kind of unique is, rather than there being like only 2 or 3 that come out and you have to pick between those, you can pick up the whole stack and look through it. So your first one has to be a level 1, and you can look through all those level 1s. You pick the one you want, you put it in your area, and now you have another action you can take. And then once you're getting on to the second one, you can take a level 2 or a level 1, and you look through all those stacks. So it could lend to some level of AP if you are playing with an AP prone player, but I think it's a really neat sort of almost a sandboxy feel to the game as you are building your tableau, figuring out how to develop your bag so that you can draw the right workers out in the order you want them. And there's also kind of a main board where you can score points, and when you put workers on that board, they stay there and you don't get them back. But that is also how you can score some significant points in the game. So there's a little bit of a tension between, okay, I want workers in my bag so that I can take various actions, but at some point I want to get rid of those workers onto this board, because once those spaces are taken, the space is gone and your worker is gone. So trying to find that balance in the game is really unique to Orleans. And when I decided not to end up moving on from this game and trading it away, I also upgraded the chits. So instead of the little cardboard chits that come with the game, I've got like nice little plastic chits that go into the bag, and it makes it much more tactile. And I upgraded all the little pieces that go on the board with like realistic looking wheat and brocades and the various cheese, wine, that sort of thing that you collect as you move around the countryside. So it's a lot more fun and tactile to play with. I think I have not upgraded the coins. That is probably the last upgrade I need to do for this game, but I will probably do that eventually and make it a fully upgraded game. This is one that I can really see potentially moving up my list over time. So that is Orleans, number 36. Number 35, I'm going to say it's my 35, mostly up on it, although it has slid down my list, and largely I think because it feels there's a tiny bit of a grindiness to it. It's not much, it's just a little bit. It still remains a fantastic economic game. And that's the 2017 release of Clans of Caledonia by Yuma Aljuju and art by Clemens Franz. There's a lot to like about this game. It's a lot of game. It's a lot of economic strategy. It's in a very small box for the game size, like 4 tiles that you put together to create the game board. It's got a solo option that you can just play on, I think it's just 1 tile. The different clans, I want to say there's about 12 to 14 different clans that come in the game, and each clan has its own unique economic bent, a thing that they are gonna specialize in. So one clan specializes in crafting beer, and so if you spend your game developing your beer economy, you're going to maximize that clan. Another game is good at fishing, and even though fish isn't a resource, it's like the way they can place their workers around the board and get access to spaces and move around gives them an advantage. Another clan that specializes in milk, and so they make a little extra money whenever their cows produce milk. So in amidst all of that, there's these orders that you're fulfilling, and those are very strategic. That is largely where you're going to get a ton of points in the game, because every time you fill an order, you're going to be moving up some resources around this track, your export resources, and the end game points are, the least exported resource will score the most points, and the most exported resource will score the least amount of points, but still will often score a lot of points. And so you really want to be able to maximize that, especially if you get later in the game and you can get to this point where you're like, okay, I see that this resource is definitely going to be the least, and if I get this order fulfilled, it'll still be the least, but I'll have the most of that resource. So you can kind of jump ahead. Getting orders at the end of the game, however, is more expensive. It costs like $15 dollars. I forget what the money, lira. I forget what it is in that particular game. Some Scottish coin. It costs 15 to get an order, and then you have to fulfill the order. There's a lot of money flowing back and forth between the items you trade at the stock, I guess you call it a stock market. So you can buy and sell items. Now you can't do it like a stock market where you can only, if you buy an item, you can't then sell the same item later for more money that same round. You'd have to wait till the next round. So it's not a stock market like that, but sometimes it's better to build resources on the board where you produce those resources, and other times it's better just go to the market and get it. And then there's some interactivity with the other players where if you build things next to a player, you can get a discount in the market, and that's another way to get items or things that you need to fulfill your order. So there's a lot of dynamics to this resource economy game. It's a great game, and I enjoy playing it every time. When I got this game, it was a trade, and I obtained it and ended up, without even realizing it, got a fully upgraded copy. Had metal coins, 3D insert in the box, and I think the pieces were still cubes. And I ended up, that might have been the one thing I upgraded, where I bought the upgrades for the milk pails and the cheese and the bread and the beer barrels and all that stuff, the supply. So those I think I upgraded, and so it's like it's just beautiful to play with. It's very fun to interact with the components of the game in the copy that I have. But that's Clans of Caledonia, my number 35. And moving on to another game at number 34 that it's not an economic game, but it kind of feels like it a little bit. And that is Barrage. It's a 2019 release by Tommaso Battista and Simone Luciani, and art by Moro, which could be a person, could be a group, not sure. Barrage is an interesting game. I am still learning this game. I am not terribly good at it. Basically, players are building a dam system, or you have electric water processing plants, you have the dams themselves that block the water or hold it, and then you have, I forget what they're called, but that's what you have to feed your water through to get to your electric plant. It's like a node, I can't remember the word for it, the term, but you build this system and then you can process water in your system, and you get some points that way. I think you get a lot of points from just building as much off of your player board as you can. That's where I need more plays of this game, because I still am not 100% sure where all the points come from. Even though I've played several games, a couple of games I did extraordinarily well at getting water going through my dams and scoring a lot of points that way, but still ended up with half the points of the winner, who I think built their board up more. So this is one of those games where I just jumped on BGA, I started playing, and I'm still kind of working through playing various games of Barrage. I find it to be compelling and fun, and want to explore in more depth the different ways that I can build up my board and develop or manipulate the contracts and the combination of building the board, using water to make electricity, and also getting points from building off of my board so that I trigger the bonuses there. Each owner, you have different, what do you call it, entrepreneurs that are developing the dam system, and each board is slightly different. I wouldn't call it asymmetric per se. There's some asymmetry, but it's not like an asymmetric game. They all kind of operate in a similar way, but there's some balance toward, what I want to build off my board first, and the contracts I get, and that sort of thing. So I haven't mastered that, but it is fun to play. It is a little confusing. It's got a pretty big overhead for learning, because of the way the board's designed. It's not like, here's a dam, here's a dam, here's a dam. It's like, you got a place to block water here, and you might have a node, but that might feed down here. And then the way the water flows can go different ways depending on how it's channeled. And then if you get water to your electric pump here, then once it's fed through, it might flow down this way. It's like a weird array of paths where water can flow during the game. And so you have to kind of manage how that's going to work in addition to all the things I've already mentioned. So fairly heavy game, but it's fun. I enjoy it. That is my number 34. Number 33, I feel confident calling this a classic game. I think the first edition was, I don't know when it came out, but 2016 is when the second edition came out, and that is Dominion. I have had this game in my collection for quite a while. This is one of the first ones I added when I got into the board gaming hobby. And this is by Donald Vassarino, and art by Matthias Katrine, Julian Delville, Radoslaw Jakowsk, and Tomasz Jedrowsk. Some of these names are, I'm obviously struggling with, but Dominion is a fantastic game. I'm not one who's collected all the expansions of it. It takes up a lot of space if you keep it in boxes. I've actually put my copy of Dominion into it's like a trays where I got each of the cards, and then I keep the selector cards separate which are one of the cards for each card type is like a blue outline, and that's like for choosing which cards you're going to use in a given game, because you're only going to use 10, and you're going to set them up based on their prices, and then it's a deck building game. It's maybe the purest deck building game that's out there, one of the first, and still one that people probably, when they're building deck building, they kind of use this game and model some aspects of how they do deck building in their game, either after this or, oh, that game did that, so I'm going to do mine slightly differently. You're kind of trying to separate from how the deck building is done in Dominion. It's fairly, it's fairly cut and dry. You're either getting cards that are going to help you draw more cards or get through your cards faster, or you're getting point cards or money to buy more cards. So the combination of those things is, as you build your deck and you know, shuffle through it, you're going to be developing your Dominion, and whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to win. The game ends basically by, I think, 3 of the 10 decks either run out, or I think one of the point cards. I think there's what, 3 there. I want to say 2 or 3 different types of point cards that you can be pulling from to put in your deck, and when one of those runs out, I think the game end is triggered that way too. It's been a while since I've played it, so I can't remember exactly how the game end is triggered, but it is a fantastic game. I've got about 3 expansions, and I like to just shuffle all the selector cards, randomly draw 10, and see what happens, because I think that forces every player to kind of adapt on the fly rather than using the sort of standard suggestions they have in the instruction books. Those are fine. Great to play with those. I just like the randomization of, you never know what you're going to get, and you might get 2 cards that just aren't compatible together. But hey, I think that's part of the fun of the game, and you can end up with some really interesting, tricky combinations in doing that. So that is my number 33. Number 32 is the first West Kingdom game that came out, and that's Architects of the West Kingdom by S.J. McDonald and Shem Phillips, and art by Mihajo Dmitrievsky. Architects it feels a little bit like Stone Age when you first start playing it, because you know, like Stone Age, you have the different circles and the places you place workers. Architects, kind of similar. You've got these different areas where you're going to place workers. What makes it different in Architects is, in Stone Age, you're going to put down, you know, say I'm going to the gold deposit. I'm going to put 4 workers down. So I just choose to put 4 workers down all at once when I go there, and that's going to make me roll more dice, and I could get potentially more gold depending on how the dice are rolled. Stone Age had a little bit more luck in it with how the dice are rolled, that I didn't like that as much. I found it like, well, you know, oh, you had a turn where you got really lucky and rolled 4 6s. I have a turn where I rolled, you know, like a bunch of 1s and 2s, and you know, I mean, you can mitigate some of that, but it didn't, you know, if it was early on, you're kind of stuck. Architects, those actions get more powerful as you put workers on. So I go to a space, say the quarry in Architects, and I put 1 worker there. Well, the first worker I put there will get me like 1 stone, and then I put the second, and then next turn I put 2 second worker there. So now I have 2 workers, that gets me 2 stone, so forth and so on. The catch is there's another space where I can capture workers, or other people can go and they can capture my workers. And I would go, and so when spaces start filling up with different players' workers, you might want to go capture some of them for a couple of reasons. One, every time you capture those workers and put them in jail, you're going to get a coin for each worker you capture. And 2, you just don't want those actions to be terribly powerful for that person. You want them to have to work for it. So there's this sort of interesting collaboration or conflict, tension in the game with the players of trying to decide, well, when do I want to go capture workers? And, you know, because I got to decide, do I want to go capture workers and go get coins that way, or do I want to continue taking actions and making mine more powerful? There's a little bit of, maybe I want to spread my workers out on the board to make it more difficult. If you capture my workers, you're only getting like one instead of a whole bunch at once. Or is it just more valuable for me to go hard and fast over this one resource, and I'll just keep getting as much of it as I can until somebody makes me get rid of it. You also have the, what do you call it, the helpers, the townsfolk that you can go and you can draft, and they can give you some special abilities that make more of different actions, either give you an extra stone or an extra wood or something like that whenever you go to those sites. There's a black market where you can get stuff for cheaper, but now you're building up corruption for yourself. And, you know, if you have, you know, too much corruption, you can lose some points at the end of the game, but maybe that's worth it. Ultimately, you're trying to either build the cathedral on the board, or you're trying to build the buildings that you've drafted at the beginning, and they can give you victory points and that sort of thing. And then we also have the Artisans expansion, which adds some, you can get tools that go onto your workers and make them better, or you can get decorations that go onto your actual buildings and make those buildings better. So a couple of different aspects to that, and those will require you to give up workers that you will not get back. So there's a lot of tension in the game with some of the choices and the crunchiness. Really good game. I've got, there's another game that I've upgraded pieces for, so my marble looks like little marble squares, and all the wood and the stone and all that look like those aspects of the game. A lot of fun to play, a lot of player interactivity, pretty neat worker placement system, and that is Architects of the West Kingdom. I haven't played solo a lot for that, so I this is not one of the solos that I have found as compelling. I tend to find the Paladin solo a lot more compelling than Architects, but it does have a good solo, and it's a good, solid game. Our family likes it, and we've played that several times, and yeah, fantastic at number 32. Last on this list of 10 games, my number 31, before I got it, if you had told me this will be at the upper end of my top 100, I would have said no way. It's no. This is an IP game, IP, intellectual property. So I tend to think intellectual property games are just not going to be that good. That's not always true, obviously. There are some out there that are fantastic, but in this case, this was Marvel Champions, and I did not expect much of this game. When I first saw it, I'm like, oh, they're just going to capitalize on the Marvel franchise. It's not going to be that good of a game. But I watched some playthroughs and started seeing how people were interacting with the game, and I was like, that looks more challenging than I thought it would be, and a lot of players that I respected were saying good things about it, so I was like, okay, I gotta try it. So I got it, and I really enjoy this game. Now, it's one that I don't feel like, I don't necessarily want to have every single Marvel Champions thing out there, but I do enjoy having the various characters and just being able to play with them and pair different kinds of heroes together against different villains. It is engaging, and there is a lot to explore in this game. I have the base. This is by Michael Boggs, Nate French, and Caleb Grace. Lots of artists in on this, so I don't have a list of artists on this one. I looked up online. I actually couldn't find artists somewhere. I'm sure somewhere they exist, but I think they pulled art from various places maybe. I'm not sure how they went about doing the artists, but they didn't really advertise who did the art. So it's good art. It definitely is well laid out, well done on the cards. But this is a challenging game. It's a co-op game, so you're working together with other players. It's not like somebody plays the villain and somebody plays the hero. You are always playing against the villain, and you are playing with the other players against the villain. It is difficult. It scales well. So you play 2 players, you play 3 players, you play 4 players. You're going to have to really work at defeating the villain. Just because you have more heroes won't always necessarily make it easier. Now, I'm sure there's some combinations that are probably easier than others, but there's a little bit of a deck building aspect to it that's fun. And you have so you have your hero deck with hero specific cards that you'll never see in another hero's deck. Then you have some neutral cards, and usually every hero pack you get, you're going to get a few extra neutral cards, a different kind of neutral card that I don't know that's always designed for that hero. Sometimes it's for other heroes, but those you can have pretty much any number. I mean, you can only have so many copies of a given card in your deck, but you can have different, as long as they're not like the star cards where you can only have one of them in the deck. You can have quite a few neutral cards in your deck. And then there's an aspect. There are 4 different aspects. It's like leadership, fighting. It's not called fighting. It's called something else, tactics or something. I cannot remember all 4 aspects. But there are the 4 aspects, and you're only allowed to have 1 aspect unless you're a specific one that you can actually have 2 aspects. I want to say like She-Hulk or something lets you have 2 aspects, but I probably got the wrong hero for that. But most heroes, you pick an aspect and you can find various cards in that deck that fit that hero, that help them out. And each hero is very unique in how they operate, what they're going to be good at. You're going to have a quest that you're trying to, or the villain rather, has a scheme and you're trying to thwart their scheme. And there's also the villain themselves that you are trying to defeat via combat. And so there's sort of 2 ways to the win: thwart the villain's scheme or defeat the villain before they complete their scheme. I don't think you can like totally thwart their scheme. You just kind of like keep them from completing it. So technically you win by just defeating the villain, but you're gonna have to like keep that villain from developing their scheme. And so sometimes you really have to work hard at that scheme part and not get to hit the villain. And other times you really got to focus on, I got to get as many hit points on this villain as I can. And it's a really tight tension because you can only thwart the scheme if you are your alter ego. So Spider-Man can only thwart the scheme if he's Peter Parker. And he can only hit the villain and do damage to the villain if he is Spider-Man. And so that flipping back and forth between alter ego and your superhero version is a very significant part of the game and impacts, I mean, you really have to think it through. I wouldn't probably recommend this for 4 players because I think it would take forever. The 2-player games I've played tend to take like around 2 hours to defeat the villain, and work through all the different, just between thwarting the villain's scheme and making decisions about when to do damage and that sort of thing. It takes a lot of time. This is not an easy game to play, in my opinion, and it is fun and it is crunchy, and you could certainly enjoy I can sit and play it and no problem. Have 4 hours go by, it's a blast. There's a lot of cool things that can happen in the game. There's probably some good stories that can come out of playing a game like this, but 4 players I think would take an awful long time, and I could be wrong. If you've played 4 players and you have a comment about that, please post it. I'd love to hear if anybody's had that experience. It just seems like it would be a very long game at 4 players, but you're having a game night and you want a co-op that's going to take you 3-4 hours, this might be it. And it probably takes a while to complete that, but that is Marvel Champions at number 31, and that will bring an end to this section of my top 100. Please post any comments, thoughts you have on these games, any surprises here if you've watched my other lists and maybe you're even somebody who's familiar with the kind of games that I like, and perhaps you're somebody who comes to game nights over here and you didn't even know I had one of these games. What surprises you in this list, or were you surprised at where some of these rank as compared to other games? And then, you know, what do others think of the game? Some of these I think might be, there are some of these games that I know have been on other people's top 10s. And so which of these games do you think falls more in your top 10 that you would definitely rank higher, but are glad to see it on a top 100 list? So thanks for joining me today with Unraveled Game Thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video and other videos. Like and subscribe if you are willing to do so. I also have a Patreon page if you want to take a look at that. I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of content that's Patreon only. It's only like 1 or 2 things on there, but I'm hoping in the next year to start posting a few more things there for Patreon only folks, and just try to build that up a little bit. But thank you for watching this video, and until next time, have a great afternoon.